How could you abandon your family? My mom hissed when I insisted on going to MIT. I left quietly. Years later, they demanded I fund my brother's wedding. I, 28M, grew up knowing exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy, firmly at the bottom. From my earliest memories, it was clear that my younger brother Ricardo was the golden child, the sun around which our family orbited. I never thought I'd be in a position where they'd come begging for my help, but life has a funny way of balancing the scales. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home, the pattern was established early. When I made honor roll, my parents would nod absently. When Ricardo got a C+, they'd take him out for ice cream to celebrate his improvement. My basketball tournament. Sorry they couldn't make it. Ricardo had a soccer practice they couldn't miss. His soccer practice? They'd be in the front row, cameras ready, cheering louder than anyone else. Christmas mornings told the same story. I'd unwrap practical items, socks, school supplies, maybe a used book, while Ricardo tore through packages containing the latest gaming systems, designer clothes, and whatever toy was impossible to find that year. Once, when I was 14, I spent months saving up from my paper route to buy myself a decent pair of sneakers. My mom saw them and commented that I shouldn't waste money on unnecessary luxuries. The next day, she came home with a $200 pair of cleats for Ricardo because he needed them for his development. My Saturday mornings weren't for cartoons or hanging out with friends. They were for mowing lawns, cleaning gutters, and watching Ricardo while my parents slept in or ran errands. "You're the responsible one," they'd say, as if that explained why I had to act as the unpaid household staff. Despite all this, I excelled in school. Without parental support or guidance, I maintained a 4 GPA, taught myself programming during lunch breaks in the computer lab, and worked part-time at a local grocery store to save for college. I applied for every scholarship I could find, staying up late after finishing my chores and homework to complete applications. The day my acceptance letter arrived from MIT with a full scholarship was the first time I felt truly validated. My hands trembled as I read the words again and again. Full tuition, housing stipend, even a small allowance for books and expenses. Everything I had worked for, everything I had dreamed about, was right there in black and white. That night at dinner, I couldn't contain my excitement. I placed the letter on the table, waiting for the perfect moment to share my news. Finally, during a lull in conversation, I told them, "I got into MIT, full scholarship." My father glanced at the letter, then returned to his meatloaf. My mother's eyes flickered over the page before she turned to Ricardo. "Did you tell your brother about making the JV basketball team, honey?" And just like that, my achievement, probably the biggest of my young life, was brushed aside for Ricardo's utterly ordinary accomplishment. I sat there, fork suspended midway to my mouth, as they gushed over how Ricardo would surely be varsity by sophomore year. I might have let it go. I might have accepted their indifference and gone on to build my life at MIT, away from their apathy. But 2 weeks later, my father called a family meeting. Seated at our kitchen table, my father explained that after careful consideration, they had decided I would be attending the local community college instead of MIT. I could transfer to state after 2 years if my grades were good enough. It would be more practical, more affordable, despite my full scholarship, and most importantly, I could continue helping around the house. The real reason emerged as my mother dabbed at non-existent tears. Ricardo was entering his difficult high school years. He would need guidance, supervision. With my father's recent promotion requiring more travel and my mother picking up extra shifts at the hospital, they needed me at home to maintain the household and keep Ricardo on track. My father's voice hardened when I began to protest. "As long as you live under our roof, you'll follow our rules. The family needs you here." My mother added the final emotional dagger. "How could you even think about abandoning your family when we need you most, after everything we've done for you?" Everything they'd done for me, I nearly laughed at that. I nodded and said I understood, which technically wasn't a lie. I understood perfectly what was happening. I was being sacrificed on the altar of Ricardo's convenience. Again. That night, I made a decision. I emailed the scholarship committee, confirming my acceptance and asking about housing options before the official semester began. I contacted my best friend Jake, the only person who had ever truly supported me, and asked if I could store some boxes at his house. Over the next few weeks, I slowly moved my most important possessions to his garage, clothes, my laptop, the programming books I'd saved up for, and the small lockbox containing my birth certificate and social security card that I'd quietly removed from my parents' filing cabinet. I emptied my bank account and opened a new one at a different bank. I worked extra shifts, telling my parents the store was short-staffed. I sold anything I couldn't take with me on eBay using Jake's address for shipping. All the while, I nodded along as my parents discussed community college registration and the additional chores I'd need to take on since I'd only be taking a few classes. I even helped Ricardo with his summer reading assignment, all while counting down the days to my escape. The morning I left, I woke before dawn. I had already moved most of my things, so all that remained was a small duffel bag with essentials. I left a brief note on my bed. "I've decided to make my own path. Don't contact me." Jake was waiting down the block in his car. As we drove to the bus station, I felt a strange lightness. For the first time in my life, I was putting myself first. The weight of years of emotional neglect seemed to diminish with every mile we traveled away from that house. At MIT, I flourished. Without the constant drain of being the family servant, I discovered how much I could actually achieve. I graduated top of my class in computer science, secured prestigious internships each summer, and built a network of friends and mentors who actually valued my contributions. After graduation, I accepted a position at a leading tech company in Silicon Valley. My starting salary was more than my parents made combined. Within 3 years, I had been promoted twice. By 26, I had purchased my first home, a modern condo in a sought-after neighborhood. I invested wisely, built an emergency fund, and even started a small charitable foundation supporting scholarships for students from neglectful homes. Throughout these years, I maintained absolute silence with my family. They tried to contact me at first, calls, emails, even a few messages through mutual acquaintances. I ignored them all. I deliberately kept my digital footprint minimal where they might find it. No Facebook, no Instagram, nothing under my real name that could be easily searched. I even asked MIT to put me on their privacy list so my name wouldn't appear in graduation announcements or alumni publications. It wasn't difficult to keep them in the dark. They had never shown interest in my achievements before. Why would they suddenly start researching my career? In their minds, I was probably still the disappointing older son who had run away from responsibility. That suited me fine. I was building a life where I was valued, where my achievements were celebrated, not dismissed. I even found love with Sarah, a brilliant software engineer who had her own story of family struggles and understood my boundaries without question. I underwent therapy to address the scars of my childhood. Slowly, I built what my therapist called a chosen family, friends who genuinely cared about my well-being, who showed up for my accomplishments, who never made me feel like an afterthought. 7 years passed without a word from my family. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, my phone rang with a number I still recognized despite the years of silence. My father's voice sounded older but carried the same authoritative tone I remembered. He didn't start with an apology or even acknowledge the years of silence. Instead, he launched directly into the reason for his call. Ricardo was getting married. The woman was Catherine, the daughter of a prominent local businessman. The wedding would be an elaborate affair at one of the most expensive venues in our hometown. My presence was required to show family unity. And of course, my financial contribution was expected. They were asking each family member to chip in for the festivities. "We're thinking 5,000 should cover your portion," my father said. When I didn't immediately respond, his tone hardened. "After everything we've done for you, the least you could do is show up and help pay for your brother's special day." Everything they'd done for me. That phrase again. "And if I don't?" I asked, my voice calm. "Then you can kiss any remaining college fund goodbye. We've been holding it for you, but if you can't support this family in return." I almost laughed. They thought I was still in college. They thought I was still dependent on them. They had no idea who I had become in their absence. "Dad," I said quietly, "I graduated from MIT 5 years ago. I'm an executive director at one of the largest tech companies in the world. I make over $250,000 a year. I own my home outright. I haven't needed your money since the day I walked out your door, and I certainly don't need it now." The silence on the other end was deafening. For once, my father had nothing to say. "As for the wedding," I continued, "I won't be attending, and I won't be contributing. Ricardo was never my responsibility, despite how hard you tried to make him so. That hasn't changed." I hung up before he could respond. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 months later, my mother called. Her voice was frantic, tearful in a way I had never heard before. The wedding was off. Catherine's family had discovered some indiscretions in Ricardo's past, specifically that he had embezzled money from his previous employer to fund his lavish lifestyle. The charges had been quietly settled to avoid publicity, but Catherine's father had connections and had learned the truth. Not only was the wedding canceled, but all the non-refundable deposits were lost. My parents had taken out a second mortgage to cover the wedding costs, expecting to recoup some of it through gifts. Now they were saddled with debt for an event that would never happen. And it got worse. Once the embezzlement story leaked, Ricardo lost his current job. My parents had remortgaged their house a second time to help cover his legal fees and restitution payments. Now they were facing foreclosure. "We need your help," my mother sobbed. "We're going to lose everything." They needed $75,000 to save the house and pay off the most pressing debts. My father got on the phone, his voice lacking its usual authority. "Son, I know we've had our differences," he said, the understatement of the century. "But we're family. We made mistakes with you, I see that now. Please, help us fix this." I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop near their house the following weekend. I didn't commit to anything beyond that. The three of them looked shell-shocked when I walked in. My father's hair had gone completely gray. My mother's face was lined with worry. Ricardo, still handsome but noticeably heavier, slouched in his chair with the entitled posture I remembered so well. I sat down across from them, setting my laptop case on the chair beside me. I had dressed carefully that morning, tailored suit, expensive watch, the subtle markers of success that I knew would register with them. "Thank you for coming," my mother began, reaching for my hand. I kept my hands wrapped around my coffee cup. "We've missed you so much." For the next 20 minutes, they took turns explaining their dire situation: the foreclosure notice, Ricardo's legal troubles, the canceled wedding and lost deposits. They had exhausted their retirement savings, borrowed from friends, sold everything of value. They had nowhere else to turn. "We're still family," my mother concluded, "no matter what happened in the past." I took a sip of my coffee and set the cup down carefully. "When I was 16, I began, I saved for 6 months to buy a graphing calculator for my AP Calculus class. The day before I could buy it, you took the money for Ricardo's baseball camp." My mother flushed. "That was when I got accepted to MIT," I continued as if she hadn't spoken. "With a full scholarship that I earned entirely on my own, you decided I should give it up to stay home and essentially be Ricardo's unpaid nanny and tutor." "We needed you at home," my father said, his tone defensive. "No, you wanted someone to shoulder your parental responsibilities so you wouldn't have to. There's a difference." I looked at each of them in turn. "When I needed family, you chose Ricardo, every single time. You sacrificed my future for his convenience without a second thought." "That's not fair," Ricardo interjected, speaking for the first time. "It's not my fault they gave me stuff." "No, it's not," I agreed. "The fault lies with them, but you were happy enough to benefit from it without ever acknowledging the cost to me." I opened my laptop, turned it to face them, and pulled up my banking app. "I could pay off your debts today. The amount you're asking for wouldn't even require me to adjust my budget for the month." I let that sink in for a moment. "But I won't." "Why not?" my father demanded, a flash of his old authority returning. "If you have the money and we're family." "Because you were never family to me," I said simply. "Family supports each other. Family celebrates achievements. Family makes sacrifices for each other, not just demands them from one person." I closed the laptop. For a brief moment, looking at my mother's tear-streaked face, I felt a pang of doubt. These were still the people who had raised me, however imperfectly. Was I becoming just as callous as they had been? Would helping them, despite everything, be the right thing to do? The merciful thing. I imagined how it would feel to transfer the money, to see their relief, perhaps even their gratitude. But then I remembered all the times I had needed them, all the times they had chosen Ricardo, all the sacrifices that had only ever flowed in one direction. I remembered the coldness in my father's voice when he told me to give up MIT. I remembered my mother's indifference to my achievements, and I knew that if I helped them now, nothing would fundamentally change. They would take what they needed and return to seeing me as nothing more than a resource to be tapped when convenient. My momentary doubt hardened into resolve. "I built my success despite you, not because of you, and I won't use it to bail out the people who never believed in me." My father's face darkened with anger. My mother began to cry in earnest. Ricardo glared at me with a mixture of resentment and disbelief. "You selfish bastard," my father hissed, loud enough that nearby patrons turned to look. "After everything." "If you say after everything we've done for you one more time," I cut in, my voice deadly quiet, "I will stand up and leave right now. Tell me, Dad, what exactly did you do for me? Did you support my dreams? Did you celebrate my achievements? Did you ever even once put my needs above Ricardo's?" He had no answer. I stood up and gathered my things. "I'm sorry you're in this situation," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I took no joy in their suffering. "But your financial problems are the direct result of your choices, the same way my success is the result of mine." I walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. As I drove away, my phone began to light up with calls and texts, not just from my parents and Ricardo, but from aunts, uncles, and family friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Flying monkeys deployed to shame me back into line. I blocked them all. 2 months later, I received an email from a childhood friend still living in my hometown. My parents' house had been foreclosed on. Ricardo had moved back in with them before the eviction, and all three were now living in a small apartment on the edge of town. My father had taken a job as a night security guard. My mother was working double shifts at the hospital. Ricardo was still unemployed. 6 months after that, another update reached me. My parents had divorced, the financial stress having finally broken their marriage. Ricardo had been arrested again, this time for writing bad checks. My mother had sent one final, desperate email to my work address, begging for help for her sake, if not for Ricardo's. I never replied. Some might call me heartless. Some might say that no matter what they did, they're still my parents, still my brother. But family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, support, and love freely given, not demanded as a toll. In therapy, I've come to understand that maintaining boundaries isn't revenge, it's self-preservation. I've learned that I can feel sympathy for their situation without taking responsibility for it. I've accepted that their choices led them here, just as mine led me to where I am. Today, my life is filled with people who value me. My career continues to thrive. Sarah and I are discussing marriage, a commitment I now understand should be based on mutual respect and support, not obligation. My chosen family, friends who have shown me what true care looks like, bring joy to my life that I never thought possible. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have. Sometimes you have to build your own with people who actually value you. That's not tragedy. It's not even revenge. It's justice.